Welcome to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Safety Systems, audio-visual systems for your home or office, home automation, security, and life safety systems. Safety Systems, locally owned, family-owned business for more than 20 years. They can take care of you in all of those areas. They've done wonders for me at my home. Call VFL JJ Surlis. You'll be very happy that you did. They will take great care of you, whether it's security, life safety, home automation, or audio-visual needs that you need fulfilled. All right. 2 weeks ago, Wyoming receiver Isaiah Neyor committed to Tennessee, and there was much rejoicing. In part because the people who had run the Rivals.com site down at Texas wrote that, they suggested that Tennessee had bought the kid, that they were playing the NIL game properly. Well, Tennessee fans love that. Finally, we're outbidding Texas. And then fast forward 1 week, and he's now at Texas. And suddenly I've seen on message boards and social media some of the people who were rejoicing that Tennessee had won the NIL battle are now cursing the NIL game. This isn't fair, it's cheating. When you win with it, it's great. When you lose with it, it's horrible. Well, over the summer, when NIL first passed, we did an episode on this show where we talked about it and discussed the potential Wild West nature of NIL. And I personally said I like it in theory. I just worried about A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. A few days later, David, you wrote in The Athletic that there are people out there who are using these fear tactics, these fear-mongers. I believe I might have called you.
I think so.
I might have called you.
It's possible.
But anyway, she wrote so imagine my surprise when I read a couple of weeks ago, and I've been trying to get you on the show since this. Imagine my surprise when I read, he writes in a column on January 6th that college football has gotten, quote, way more chaotic with NIL. And let's take a look. Let's use Ebenezer's words against him. It feels a lot more likely to be a negative development for college football than a positive one. But college football today is a far less inherently exploitative enterprise than it was a year ago. That's a good thing, even if the sport requires further adjustment to reach a serviceable stopping point for its current state of upheaval. Preventing the sport from becoming more fair and equitable is never the right decision if maintaining the sport's health comes at the cost of continuing to allow everyone involved to benefit except players. In short, player freedom is good, but this amount of turnover is not likely to help the sport. It's even more likely to cost players scholarships and degrees as they enter the portal but struggle to find a serviceable way out. The unprecedented player movement might leave fans less invested. It worsened an already barely sustainable quality of life for coaches who are left recruiting high school prospects and now their own rosters and opposing rosters with players who elected to transfer. So, my question, David.
Yes.
Over the summer, I said, I like it, but A, B, C, D, E. You, and I was a fearmonger. You're now writing A, B, C, D, and E, but I like it. So what does that make you?
I don't think when we were talking about fearmongers, it's that, this is the end of college football. Right. Not really specifically you, right. As much as people who just were like, college football is going to die, this is the death of the sport. Like, it's not. It's going to. But ultimately, the player movement is pretty chaotic, and
it's been more chaotic than the.
It has been. I don't think
expected.
I never would have expected this amount of player movement to the point where you have coaches talking about, I'm scared I'm going to lose an entire position group, an entire room, and you're sort of preparing for all these sort of doomsday scenarios on your roster. The roster management, they got to fix that, and no one has a good fix, and I don't know how you do that because you're not going to take a step backward and make transfer more restrictive, and you're not going to take a step and take NIL away. Ultimately, what I wrote, and I've heard multiple coaches say the same thing, is that you're going to have to end up paying players and having actual contracts, collective bargaining agreements, and change this relationship from an employee to an employer relationship. People don't like that, but that's where it's going to go, and ultimately, college sports is going to go to the path that gets them less likely to be sued, and that's where it's going.
Which the problem I have with that is, why is it even a college sport at that point?
It's a fair question.
I mean, do they even go to class at that point?
Yeah, well,
why would
the
they
thing
go to
is,
class?
the entire enterprise hasn't made sense for a long time, for decades. Basically, ever since the TV money came in, people want to pretend like this is amateur sports and they're playing it for the love of the game and all these things. The economic model has never made sense. You have to blow it all up because it just doesn't make sense.
But there is a huge danger in blowing it all up.
In sense, but as long as you have guys wearing Tennessee, wearing whatever school, playing in stadiums on Saturdays, you're still going to have a solid enterprise. Coaching facilities may have to change, coaching salaries may have to change, a lot of stuff is going to have to change. But as long as you have that core, I think you're going to be okay.
I think it's untouchable here. I think in the South, where people didn't have pro sports, so they latched on to colleges. I think you could hit it with a 50 megaton nuke, and you couldn't damage college football. I think there are other places though where it may.
The West
drop a
Coast,
little
you're
bit.
probably right. You're probably right.
Mark, I'm going to hit you. This next segment's going to be all about you as a former player. You've got one view of NIL. As a former coach and talking to other coaches, I'm sure you got another view of NIL. But Vince and Chuck, your thoughts so far, has it been more Wild West than you expected? Or did you say back at the time, there are an awful lot of pitfalls that could come from this? Where were you?
Well, I was for it, but because the NCAA wasn't prepared for it, I'm not shocked that it's become this wide open and become now there's so much movement and Wild West, as John mentioned, it's unfortunate because yes, you weren't going to take away all the pitfalls and obstacles that were going to come from this, but the NCAA could have helped by giving some kind of guidance, and maybe there's others that maybe failed along the way, but that's the tough part for me.
You kind of even left it state to state, correct?
Oh, yeah.
You don't even have the national thing.
They did the Pontius Pilate routine.
Exactly.
Good luck, everybody.
Exactly.
Literally, COVID opened the eyes of everybody in college sports that realized the NCAA is not going to do anything.
Right.
It's all up to the conferences, and you're on your own. And this has been the same with everything that's happened in the last 2 years. That they knew the NCAA is worthless at this point. It does nothing.
And you didn't just go from 0 to 60. I mean,
Right.
what
Yeah.
did you go to 0 to 100?
Well, and we talked before the show, one of the issues is you hit the double whammy at the same time.
Yes.
So you're dealing with the new wide open transfer portal at the same time you're dealing with the new wide open NIL stuff, and it's just a whole mess of crazy at the moment. I don't know how you figure it out. But I tell you what, when we come back, I want to get your take on this because we've had many conversations off air over the past few weeks that I want to bring out for everybody, just what a former coach, former player thinks of NIL. Come on back on the Sports Source.